Welcome to the first teaching lesson for the CER competency. We're going to read 2 short stories for this unit. You do need to do every single one of the assignments in order to do the assessment. So you need to make sure you are turning in each assignment right when you're done doing it, and don't do the next one until you have completed the one before it. So we are going to start with a teaching lesson, and we are going to begin a story called Hop Frog. So I'm going to play it for you on my screen and play the audio just like I do during class. However, if that doesn't work for you, you can read it on your own and then just come back to the video. You might have to like fast forward or something through. It does tell you in the story when to start and when to stop. So yeah, tomorrow we will finish the story of Hop Frog, and I'm going to go through and kind of explain it because it is a little difficult to understand at times. And today's focus is really going to be on claim because a lot of people are really struggling with claim, so today is just going to be all about claim. So let's get started, shall we?
Hop Frog, written by Edgar Allan Poe, performed by Caden Von Clegg. I never knew anyone so keenly alive to a joke as the king was. He seemed to live only for joking. To tell a good story of the joke kind, and to tell it well, was the surest road to his favor. Thus it happened that his 7 ministers were all noted for their accomplishments as jokers. They all took after the king, too, in being large, corpulent, oily men, as well as inimitable jokers. Whether people grow fat by joking, or whether there is something in fat itself which predisposes to a joke, I have never been quite able to determine, but certain it is that a lean joker is rara avis in terris. About the refinements, or as he called them, the ghost of wit, the king troubled himself very little. He had an especial admiration for breadth in a jest, and would often put up with length for the sake of it. Over-niceties wearied him. He would have preferred Rabelais' Gargantua to Zadig of Voltaire, and upon the whole, practical jokes suited his taste far better than verbal ones. At the date of my narrative, professing jesters had not altogether gone out of fashion at court. Several of the great continental powers still retained their fools who wore motley, with caps and bells, and who expected to be always ready with sharp witticisms, at a moment's notice, in consideration of the crumbs that fell from the royal table. Our king, as a matter of course, retained his fool. The fact is, he required something in the way of folly, if only to counterbalance the heavy wisdom of the 7 wise men who were his ministers, not to mention himself. His fool, or professional jester, was not only a fool, however. His value was trebled in the eyes of the king, by the fact of his being also a dwarf and a cripple. Dwarves were as common at court in those days as fools, and many monarchs would have found it difficult to get through their days are rather longer at court than elsewhere, without both a jester to laugh with and a dwarf to laugh at. But as I have already observed, your jesters in 99 cases out of 100 are fat, round, and unwieldy, so that it was no small source of self-gratulation with our king that, in Hop Frog, this was the fool's name, he possessed a triplicate treasure in one person. I believe the name Hop Frog was not that given to the dwarf by his sponsors at baptism, but it was conferred upon him by general consent of the several ministers on account of his inability to walk as other men do. In fact, Hop Frog could only get along by a sort of interjectional gait, something between a leap and a wriggle, a movement that afforded illimitable amusement and, of course, consolation to the king, for, notwithstanding the protuberance of his stomach and a constitutional swelling of the head, the king, by his whole court, was accounted a capital figure. But although Hop Frog, through the distortion of his legs, could move only with great pain and difficulty along a road or floor, the prodigious muscular power which nature seemed to have bestowed upon his arms, by way of compensation for deficiency in the lower limbs, enabled him to perform many feats of wonderful dexterity, where trees or ropes were in question, or anything else to climb. At such exercises, he certainly much more resembled a squirrel or a small monkey than a frog. I am not able to say with precision from what country Hop Frog originally came. It was from some barbarous region, however, that no person ever heard of, a vast distance from the court of our king. Hop Frog and a young girl, very little less dwarfish than himself, although of exquisite proportions, and a marvelous dancer, had been forcibly carried off from their respective homes in adjoining provinces, and sent as presents to the king, by one of his ever-victorious generals. Under these circumstances, it is not to be wondered at that a close intimacy arose between the two little captives. Indeed, they soon became sworn friends. Hop Frog, who, although he had made a great deal of sport, was by no means popular, had it not in his power to render Trippetta many services, but she, on account of her grace and exquisite beauty, although a dwarf, was universally admired and petted. So she possessed much influence, and never failed to use it whenever she could for the benefit of Hop Frog. On some grand state occasion, I forgot what, the king determined to have a masquerade, and whenever a masquerade or anything of that kind occurred at our court, then the talents both of Hop Frog and Trippetta were sure to be called into play. Hop Frog, in especial, was so inventive in the way of getting up pageants, suggesting novel characters, and arranging costumes for masked balls, that nothing could be done, it seems, without his assistance. The night appointed for the fete had arrived. A gorgeous hall had been fitted up under Trippetta's eye, with every kind of device which could possibly give éclat to a masquerade. The whole court was in a fever of expectation. As for costumes and characters, it might well be supposed that everybody had come to a decision on such points. Many had made up their minds as to what roles they should assume, a week or even a month in advance, and in fact there was not a particle of indecision anywhere, except in the case of the king and his 7 ministers. Why they hesitated I never could tell, unless they did it by way of a joke. More probably they found it difficult on account of being so fat, to make up their minds. At all events, time flew, and as a last resort they sent for Trippetta and Hop Frog.
All right, so we are going to stop there for today in the reading. Now let's talk a little bit about this story. So, as you know now, it's written by Poe. And if Edgar Allan Poe, I like to say if he had been alive today, he would be one of the, or maybe the only writer of the Saw franchise. He writes often horror stories, sometimes there's gore. So this is one of his works. This takes place like a long time ago, like hundreds of years ago, when kings had like a court, essentially. So imagine like way back in the Middle Ages or something, almost like that, the whole Monty Python era. The king has his 7 homies. They're all fat. They're all obnoxious. They're all super entitled. They love playing jokes on people, like, love it. And they don't really care how they treat people. So most kings had a jester or a fool, somebody who would like make them laugh because that was their entertainment. They didn't have TV. I mean, they didn't have electricity, so how could they? So this king felt like he had won the lottery when it came to his fool because he found a little person. So Hop Frog is not a frog. That's his nickname. That's the name that they call him. They don't even call him by his real name. We don't even know what it is. But Hop Frog is a little person, under 4 feet tall. He is crippled, especially from the waist down. Like his legs are very tiny. They don't really work very well. However, from the waist up, he is very muscular, like freakishly strong in the arms. So he looks extremely disproportionate. And so he was kidnapped from wherever he's from. And then another little person, Trippetta, a female, was also kidnapped. And she is gorgeous. She is a dancer. She's also one of the king's entertainers. And so those two became good friends. And that's where we stop our story right now. So what I need you to do next is to open up your assignment for today. So you're going to open up the CER Respond to Text Lesson 1 assignment, the teaching assignment. We're going to do this one together, all but like one little part. So we have our rubric, claim, evidence, reason. Today we're going to be focusing on claim. And the key to today is this reasonably inferred. That means you have to think of what it's saying. We can't have something that's factual or overgeneralized, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what I would like you to do is to write the difference between an in-progress claim and a proficient claim. So reasonably inferred means it is a logical guess. So in progress, you can write this with me, is a logical guess based on the facts told, but does not repeat the facts told. So please write that down. I'll give you a minute. Oops, I totally just wrote that wrong. Proficient. Oh my gosh. So ignore all that. Proficient is a logical guess based on the facts told, but does not repeat the facts told. Proficient, not in progress. Please fix that. Okay, so scrolling down some more. This next section, you're going to write 2 separate claims, based on the character of Trippetta. So using this extract, so this is from the part of the story we just read. So Hop Frog and a young girl, very little less dwarfish than himself, meaning she's the same size-ish, although of exquisite proportions and a marvelous dancer. So while Hop Frog has very small legs and very large arms, she is proportionate to a taller person. Had been forcibly carried off from their respective homes in adjoining provinces and sent as presents to the king by one of his ever victorious generals. Under these circumstances, it is not to be wondered at that a close intimacy arose between the 2 little captives. Indeed, they soon became sworn friends. Hop Frog, who although he made a great deal of sport, was by no means popular. It had not in his power to render Trippetta many services, but she, on account of her grace and exquisite beauty, although a dwarf, was universally admired and petted, so she possessed much influence and never failed to use it when she could for the benefit of Hop Frog. So Hop Frog didn't really hold a lot of sway with the king, but Trippetta, many people loved Trippetta, so she could often influence or manipulate people to her benefit and to Hop Frog's benefit. So using this section, let's think of a claim for Trippetta. The first thing that comes to mind is beloved. So looking at this text, can I write that? Is that a fact or is that an inference? So remember, a fact is something that's already stated in the text. So beloved is a synonym for the word admired. We have admired in there, so I can't write that because that is a synonym, that is a fact. So if I wrote that, I would get in progress. We're trying to get proficient. So what else can we say for Trippetta? What is she like? So one thing that comes to mind is that if she's also been kidnapped from her home with Hop Frog and they're really close friends, and that she uses her, like, what people love about her to help him, I would say that she is trustworthy. So if I were Hop Frog, I would trust her. So I'm going to say Trippetta is trustworthy. does it say that anywhere in there? Nope. So that is a logical guess based on the facts presented. So now I'm going to try and come up with a second claim. And I'm going to say that Trippetta is compassionate. Does it say she's compassionate anywhere? Oh, her name has two P's in it. Let's see. Nope, doesn't say it. So it says they're friends. It says she uses her influence to help Hop Frog. It says that she is very good friends with him, sworn friends with him. So therefore, she is compassionate. So she understands and is there for Hop Frog. She's a good friend, basically. So those are proficient claims. Those are not stated in the text. They're not synonyms of words stated in the text because that's all in progress. These are reasonable inferences, so aka logical guesses based on what the text says. So what I would like you to do is write those down, submit those, and then move on to lesson 2, which is an independent practice lesson. We're going to finish the story in lesson 2, and I will help you along the way and explain some things as we go along. Later.